without a doubt, this, in my opinion, is the best company we've looked at yet. It meets my top four criteria. Share structure, got a tight share structure. It's got experienced and successful people. It's got a couple of really interesting exploration projects with some near-term potential. It's got some cash. It's going to go to the market, raise money, but they keep increasing the amount of money their private placements are listed at.
I concur with Mickey completely. I saw these guys at PDAC, and and then I sort of put them in my back pocket as like, okay, I'm going to do something with these guys eventually. And then they popped up on this scope, and I was very excited about this. I think he's underplaying the antimony side, although I understand why. Leave that to other people. I've been following antimony deeply. Antimony is a story that is not going away.
I know some of the people. I've worked through Simon at Glass Earth, very solid guy, knows the geology. I've been through Reefton a few times in that area, and it is probably the most mining friendly region within New Zealand. My concern is these veins are highly variable, and it's going to take a lot of tight drilling to prove up a resource, indicated and measured, especially. He mentioned 150 meters or something if we're inferred. That's way out of line. That's going to be 20 meters.
I was going to agree with Mickey. I think this is the best we've talked to so far. My concern is really among, like Nick's, that they have a fairly high market cap for what they have right now. But I think that they kind of undersold the projects or what they do have. I mean, they control a district with historic production at very high grades. The hub and spoke idea really just came up at the end, and they could have just led with that. And the admission that they have about 400,000 ounces already, and what they can see is something you can't put in a news release, but the kind of thing that needs to be put in these kinds of discussions.
Yeah, I echo most of these guys' comments. My concern would be that I shied away from New Zealand as well in the past because of the how green the communities are there. But the only concern I would have is, like Brent said, the variability in these kinds of deposits, make the waiting for the drilling news kind of a gamble sometimes.
Well, I usually don't like to buy stocks unless I can do a private placement with a favorable warrant. But I am impressed by the fact that these guys have been able to finance without warrants. And I think it's a good deal. And I listen, this is just me, but with gold at 3,300 and things the way they are, and the fact there's zero interest on the part of the retail public in these stocks, I think it's a good bargain, and I'd be willing to buy some out of the market, and I think I will, which is not something I normally do because I deals with warrants.
All right, we're here with Robert. He's here to talk to us about Rua Gold. So, Robert, take it away.
Straight into it. Thanks very much, Matt, and thanks for organizing today's expert roundtable. It's a real honor to be here. I'd be lost if I didn't have Simon by my side. So Simon Henderson, our CEO and the actual geologist that has all the knowledge, is here for all the technical questions and to support me. But I'll get into the overview of Rua Gold, what our mission is and what we're up to. Very quick background on me. I'm an accountant by trade. I started my career over in Perth at Ernst & Young, one of the big four, before quickly, well, not so quickly, after 7 years, I switched and wanted to actually be on the mining side of the fence. I always audited mining companies, but I did a Master's of Science in Mineral Economics at the Curtin School of Mines out in Kalgoorlie, and then went off to the DRC to live on a copper mine for a couple of years. So I've probably got more dirty boots experience than your average accountant. I love mining. I've done nothing but mining through my career. And this is my first CEO role. My previous role from this was starting Aris Mining. I was the CFO of Aris Mining. Neil Woodyer and I had sort of worked together for the last 10 years, and that was our last venture together. Aris Mining is now a $1.5 billion Colombian gold producer. And so it sort of got through that infancy to mature stage. I love the infancy stage. I love kicking off these gold mining companies, and that's what we're doing here at Rua Gold. So I'll jump into the presentation. I think we're a really interesting story. I think you guys hopefully will find some new lessons here about the world of New Zealand and gold in New Zealand. I think I believe New Zealand is actually the best jurisdiction worldwide I think they were one step ahead of most of the world leaders in terms of putting a focus back on mining, and they've really created an opportunity for explorers to develop their projects a lot quicker than normal. So we've got two really highly prospective land packages in New Zealand, and we're very much focused on a time when gold, as you guys all know, is all-time importance. We're in New Zealand because it's the best jurisdiction in terms of getting approvals and streamlining processes for mining operations to actually move from exploration to extraction. And we have a team that have come together with knowledge that have operated on almost all the continents of the world, bar Antarctica. And we really have the strength and the bench skill set to actually take this all the way through from exploration through to development. And so we're not just your normal explorationists here. But where I want to actually start this is on New Zealand, because it's not on everybody's radar. It's a little country of 5 million people, but it actually has a long history of gold mining. It had a huge gold rush, bigger than California's gold rush back in the early sort of 1870s through the 1920s. And they've got really good geology down there. Apart from having a long history of gold mining, most recently, they've got a government in power that is absolutely hell-bent on getting mining reinvigorated in New Zealand. And so they were actually one of the first countries out there to talk about a fast-track process. The benefits of New Zealand is, again, it's a small country. So to actually streamline and expedite mining approvals doesn't have as many layers to cut down as some of your comparatives like the US or like Canada. And so they've actually managed to implement, and it's now in the law, a fast-track mining bill where you can get a mine permitted in 6 months. And that's actually in process right now. Some of our neighbors are going through that, and we're about to see that unfold this year. Other things they've done is they've committed through their mining strategy to double mining exports in the next 10 years. And they're already a major exporter of coal up to Japan because it has really high-grade coal. They've got mineral sands coming out at the moment. And again, I've mentioned there's a couple of gold mines operating already. And then the last thing I'll mention is that for the first time ever, New Zealand has introduced their critical minerals list. And on that critical minerals list includes gold and antimony, both of which are on our property, but they even put met coal on the critical minerals list. So I'm trying to speak to the volumes that the government really want to reinvigorate mining in New Zealand. They want us there, and they're proactively pushing us to be there. So it's a really good jurisdiction to be in. The team behind this, as I mentioned, we've got some really good bench strength behind us. This is not our first time. We're not lifestyle junior miners here looking for a paycheck. We're actually here to develop this into a real company. Between us, we've raised over $2 billion of capital. We've built 8 mines on time, under budget, and we've had $11 billion in excess. It's led by Oliver Lennox King. He's an absolute legend in the industry, and he actually keeps a very low profile. But he was the founder of Frontier Gold, a Nevada explorer that he sold for over $1 billion to Newmont. And then he's also had Rox Gold most recently, which he started as a Burkina Faso high-grade gold producer. And he started that. His right-hand man was Paul Criddle, also on our board. And between them, they built Rox Gold into a producer, which sold to Fortuna Mining for over $1 billion as well. So they've got their own track record. Paul Criddle brings great expertise when it comes to moving into that development phase. And when we designed our exploration program, we had myself, Simon, and Paul sitting around the table in January down in New Zealand to say, let's not just plug holes in the ground for the sake of some sugar hits. Let's actually design our exploration program around what we envisage for our project, which is a hub and spoke type model, which we'll get into. So again, we're approaching this in a very systematic approach to take it from exploration through to development in a short time frame. The other mentions I'll have here, Simon is on the call, so I'll let him introduce himself and then we'll carry on. Over to you, Simon, for a quick intro.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I've been around for too long, really. 50 years now in the industry. Largely worked on almost every continent in the world, but the key, I guess, is my New Zealand experience. I was on the original team of 2 geologists that brought the resource of Martha Hill into production from 1980 to 1987. That mine has now produced an order of 6 or 7, I think it's approaching its 10 millionth ounce of production, so a large epithermal system on its own. And from that experience and some sort of high-end technical assistance in terms of systematic gold exploration in a Pyrrhic victory, I guess, I was directed the discovery of WKP, this second very large epithermal system just north of Waihi itself. But I had 10 years in Australia in orogenic gold systems. We went into a mine with 200,000 ounces in the middle of the Tanami Desert, and 8 years later it produced 750,000 ounces of gold. Came back to New Zealand in 2002, founded my own small company, Glass Earth Gold, which was pivotal in the discovery of WKP. But as we know, if you don't get your joint ventures right, you're going to lose out, and we lost that project to Newmont, subsequently Oceana Gold. I was really intrigued.
Don't give away the surprises there, Simon. My storytelling is getting away from me.
All right, perhaps that's enough. I've had heaps of experience, and I'm very excited to be back both in the epithermal regime and the hierarchy, and in particular in this orogenic belt in Reefton, where I think things are really warming up.
Yeah, Simon brings a huge amount of maturity and absolute diligence when it comes to these assets, which we'll get into in a second. The last mention before we get into these assets is a quick touch on the share structure. So we've got a really nice tight float, 63 million shares out, currently sitting around a 45 million market cap Canadian. 22% of the company is held by insiders. I think a key point here is that's real checks written. Our average cost base of this company from founding it back in 2019 to today is around the 75 cent Canadian mark. And we're trading right there today after we've de-risked it, after we've put an amazing land package together. So anyone getting into the story is coming very much aligned to where we sit right now. And if anyone takes a look at the SETI filings, you'll see outside of private placements where we've put our own $1 million in this year, $1.2 million this year, we've also done another $400,000 of on-market buying. So we all believe in this story, but we're also putting our money where our mouth is. So we're not here to take a ride from shareholders. We're all aligned, and we're going to build this from here. The last 2 financings we've done over the last 12 months have been heavily institutionally backed, led by Ixios and Libra out of New York, Ixios, out of France, and Zechner out of Toronto. So we have good institution support. The raises we've done have been with a very little discount to where we're trading at, and there's never a warrant attached to it. So any financings you get from us, unusual for junior mining, especially in the gold space, but we've got the assets and we've got the team that actually have the backing to take this without too much warrant dilution. So a nice type structure here. I'll just mention that there's a 22% block held by Siren, which is an ASX company, and I'll get into how that came about as we talk about Reefton. So with that, let's talk about the assets. So 2 assets, one in the North Island in that Hauraki district. That's exactly where Simon was talking about. That's where he cut his teeth on the epithermals. He spent 7-8 years delineating Waihi as an open pit, which has produced 10 million ounces today. He's discovered WKP, another epithermal deposit up there. So he's got a huge amount of experience up there. But our most advanced exploration project, and where we're going to start the journey today, is down in the South Island at the Reefton Goldfield. That's a past producing area. It produced 2 million ounces between the 1880s and the 1950s. And that was where one of the original gold rushes of New Zealand was. This is an orogenic style deposit, and it's really high grade. this type of mineralization we're talking about here is a gold antimony type deposit, and it's very similar to what you see in the Bendigo Ballarat region. You'll hear me reference things like Southern Cross Gold, who are a step ahead of us in terms of about 12 months more of drilling and a lot more meters of drilling that they've done. But same as Fosterville. I mean, it's cliche to compare yourself to Fosterville, but we're talking the exact same age of rock, the mineralization style. There's white papers out there that the South Island of New Zealand actually split across from Victoria and became its own island. So we're talking high vein, narrow vein deposits is what we're looking at here. And through a mixture of creating this company back in 2019 privately, and through a mixture of M&A that we executed last year, we've actually managed to now take over 95% of this Reefton gold field. So 95%, 9 past producing mines on this gold field produced 2 million ounces of gold at average grade of around 25 grams a ton. So it's really encouraging to have the whole gold field under our belt because it brings scale to this project. The one comparative which I'll call out just as we're looking at the screen here is the neighbor in the middle of us, this L shape here. This is a private Australian company called Federation Mining. They're backed by a group called Australian Superannuation Fund. They're fully permitted all the way to first gold. They've raised over $200 million Australian, so 150 million US they've raised, and they're building that mine. They're right in the middle of us. They have one historic mine that they've gone in underneath, and they've got close to 800,000 ounces at 24 grams a ton. So really what they are to us is a proof of concept. We can say now with more confidence that when you look at the Reefton Goldfield, let me get rid of that annotation. When you look at the Reefton Goldfield, you're talking about an area that has a lot of old historic mines that haven't really been touched since the 1950s. And so the old timers would come through and they'd go down 500 meters or 300 meters into these old veins, and they'd just follow these veins down and take out the golden quartz. All comes out from gravity, so they get fairly decent recovery. And you look at examples like Murray Creek, where they got 40,000 ounces at 20 grams a ton, and they went down 200 meters. That neighbor I was talking about, Federation Mining, their historic mine went down 700 meters, and the guys that are operating it now just went underneath that old mine, drilled down, and they've got mineralization all the way down to 1,500 meters. And again, the grade seems to get better as you go deeper. So it's really encouraging for us that we've got 7 historic mines on our property that have never been actually explored at depth since the 1950s. And the only reason they stopped back then is because you couldn't go that much deeper as you were artisanally mining back then. We're talking timber shafts and they'd just collapse, or they'd hit the groundwater table, and they didn't have the dewatering technology. So you've got one side of the coin, which is an amazing opportunity to go further at depth and really uncover how deep these veins actually go. But Simon, being the explorationist he is, he looked at this whole district from a fresh slate, and he said, what have we done? What are we doing that others haven't done in the past? Because we have had OceanaGold in this district before. They open pitted one of the historic gold mines, and I'll just pop back up to Globe Progress here. That was a historic mine that OceanaGold went back into and actually open pitted it and took another 600,000 ounces out of it. It's now in remediation and it's not operating anymore. But you've got 2 players that have come back into this district since the 50s. Both of them have hit economic amounts of gold. Both of them extracted value. Sorry, Blackwater is on the path to extracting value. But it really shows that this whole district has a lot of gold left over. So Simon's come in and over a 5-year period, we've looked at this whole district, and we've looked at soil sampling on surface, and we've done all the geophysics and the resistivity testing. So this isn't a quick rush to the market and see what's happening. And out of that process, we've identified 2 surface features here, Cumberland and Old Creek, both which you'll see won't appear on this map, but both have almost no historical mining on them. And the advantage there is that when we're drilling as a junior exploration company, Right now, we're drilling holes that are only 150 meters deep, which makes them a lot quicker and a lot faster. It's a lot more economic to prove up ounces. So that's our starting point, while we're also very interested in the brownfields of going under old mines and continuing that vein mapping all the way at depth. So you've got the flip of coin of greenfields and brownfields, and we've got a mix of both going on right now. So we have 2 drill rigs right now turning at Reefton. One is at Old Creek, and we've got a gold antimony deposit here. I'm not going to talk too much about antimony today because I'll say antimony is an amazing byproduct. Its spot price of antimony has shot from 10,000 to 60,000 over the last 2 years because of this critical mineral story, because it's used in munitions, because it's controlled by China, where China have banned exports of antimony. So there's a whole value proposition behind having antimony on the property. But at the end of the day, when we put it into the model, it's making up about 25% of the value of what we're wanting to pull out. So we're always going to be a gold-focused explorer, but antimony is an amazing byproduct. And the last thing I'll mention is it again likens itself to a group like Mandalay Resources with Costerfield, where they're producing gold at nice low all-in sustaining costs, because that antimony kicker is an amazing byproduct to have in their property. So we're in this track in Old Creek. We've already got 110,000 ounces proven up, but really this year is all about extending that resource and building inventory ounces. So right now we're drilling Old Creek and we're stepping down underneath the current resource, and then we're going to step north out of the current resource to build ounces and build out that into an aim to get somewhere in the 300,000 to 500,000 ounces. That's the sort of size we're looking for in each of these deposits. Recent drill results out of Old Creek are showing really nice sort of 12-meter widths of 12.2 gram a ton of gold equivalents. That's a 2 gram gold and a 2.4% antimony. And so we're seeing really nice wide intercepts here, very mineable, very close to surface, exactly what you want. And putting aside the actual great mineralogy that we're looking at here, just having the double critical mineral on our property gives it extra focus from New Zealand. And so when we're looking at this gold antimony deposit, it's not just from the economics, but it's also from the permitting standpoint, to the point where the Mines Minister of New Zealand is calling out Rua Gold, naming it as one of the guys putting New Zealand on the world map for antimony supply when China's cutting off supply and America's looking for antimony. So really good strategically to have this property in our portfolio. Secondly is Cumberland. And Cumberland, I think, is really, we're very much backed by gold investors. And I think Cumberland is what's really getting excitement going in the story right now. And we actually just released drill results this morning from Cumberland. This is a really interesting target in the sense that, and I'm just going to flick back up to the overview here. Cumberland is just south of the old Globe open pit. And what happened with Oceana Gold back in 2013, 2014 is that they were actually had an exploration program set to step out from Globe Progress and drill the Cumberland targets. It's called the Gallant Lode here. And it was at the time in 2013, 2014 when spot gold was going down back to $1,000 an ounce, and they just bought their Filipino mine. And essentially they made the call from head office to turn off Globe Progress. But in the meantime, the explorationists down in Reefton had drilled Gallant 001. It was 20 meters long. It was 60 grams per ton. So it was an amazing intercept on its own by any stand, but it had a meter interval of 1,900 grams per ton gold. And this is all within 65 meters of surface. So we're talking near surface, extremely high-grade gold. We picked up this property through our M&A that we closed last year, and we essentially now have Cumberland in our portfolio. We got the permits in April and we started drilling. So the first 2 holes that we drilled that we released to the market today have shown 3 meters of 6 grams a ton from 44 meters, including a meter of 16 grams a ton. and 14 meters of 3.4 grams a ton, including, I'm just going to move my speech bubble here, including 1 meter of 27 grams a ton. So again, we're looking at really high grade intercepts. We're looking at a lower grade halo around it, but very mineable, especially when you're only talking 60 meters deep. You're talking zero development cost when you're putting this into production. So really exciting. And I'll just add that these were the first 2 holes on this new target. So it's partly been helped, and I can leave it to the Q&A and Simon can talk to it more, that we've partnered with the Verify AI team, and they're helping us in how we delineate this whole gold field, because when you've got 120,000 hectares, you need a very rigorous ranking system to know where you're going to put your drill holes. And so we've partnered with Verify AI. Cumberland was one of the highest ranked targets that we went after, and a lot of it was driven by this really good historic hole. So encouraging that we found the mineralization first up, really encouraging that it's continuous and that we're proving out that continuity. And now next steps is to step down along surface 100 meters and see how that vein trends southwards. It's actually, it's been mapped on surface for about 2 kilometers south. So it's a really game-changing piece of land that we've got here. And we think that's going to really be the catalyst to get Rua to the next stage. And that's why we're drilling right now. So that's the overview of the Reefton Goldfield. 2 drills turning, immediate catalyst coming. We've cashed up. We've got money to drill this for the next 4 months. And we're going to be looking to get some real proof to the market that we're onto something big in the Reefton district. It's district scale, it's district size, it's high grade, it's an amazing jurisdiction. I'll move into the North Island, and I've only got 5 minutes to go on this one because it's really important just to keep it very high level here. This is an earlier stage exploration play. It's a neurology play, and Simon has 25 years working in this district of knowledge to actually back us on this one. And this sort of picture will explain a lot of it. So as Simon said, the Wahi gold mine, the Martha open pit, as he called it, is the open pit here that's been running since 1980s. It's got a whole town built around this open pit in New Zealand. And so when you think about New Zealand and the rolling hills and people don't like mining and things like that, there is definite pockets of New Zealand that the entire community is supported by mining. So we're in one of these pockets in Wahi. You've got a long-standing mine history. Simon's worked here before. And then we've mentioned WKP, or Wharekirauponga. This is OceanaGold's biggest pipeline project. And bringing this all the way back to the start, this is one of the first gold projects that is in the 6-month fast-track permitting process. So you've got a mine that has proven up 1.4 million ounces of close to 18 grams a ton. It's open in almost every direction, so it's going to be huge. They've brought out a PFS on it, which shows really good returns, and I think OceanaGold have been very conservative in that PFS. And so we're neighboring an area that has a mine that I think is about to be permitted in August this year. We've got all our surface work finished. We've done all our surface mapping. We've done our resistivity, our magnetics. We've got the neighboring property here. And Simon has actually worked on this area before. So we know we're not coming into this blind. We know what we're looking at. And so Glamorgan is an H2 story. We're going to start drilling this at the back end of the year on the back of Wharekirauponga getting permitted by the New Zealand government. And then we can say, yep, we're de-risked. We know that people are getting brand new mines permitted in this district. We've got the exact same surface footprint as we're seeing at Wharekirauponga. It's the classic features of a major epithermal AUAG system here. And we have the breadth to start drilling this at the back end of the year. So this is an earlier stage play. I think for anyone watching this and for you guys following along the Rua story, I think that the immediate catalyst coming from Reefton, but this is an amazing blue sky opportunity here. And I'll just mention one more thing, in that the only reason we got Glamorgan is because in New Zealand, you have 10 years with an exploration permit before you have to drop it. If you haven't declared a resource and if you haven't done the required work, which OceanaGold had held this permit on, you actually have to relinquish it. And through Simon's relationships, we had the knowledge that this was going to be relinquished. We had an application in the very day it was available, and we got granted it. It cost us a grand total of $4,000. No encumbrances, no royalties, nothing attached to it. It's complete blue sky upside for our shareholders. So a real value creator for anyone in the story. And with that, I think I'll close out just saying that we're a team that's done this before. We're in New Zealand. We've got a good, rich Kiwi background. We love gold, and I'm not going to explain to this group why gold is so important in today's market. And we're very focused, and this is our sole purpose right now. So very excited to be here, very excited to be in New Zealand. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
All right, great. It's interesting for me to find out that New Zealand has declared gold a critical mineral. Actually, that's interesting. Mickey, go ahead. You're first.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions. First off, I'm a bit concerned about the gold equivalent numbers you've done. I would admit that this is the first time I've ever seen antimony run in as a gold equivalent. So I'm addressing this to Simon, and I noticed that you did a 85% recovery on both metals. So, I would prefer that I just saw the gold numbers and with the antimony as an add-on. I'll solicit your comments on that, Simon.
We've done the initial metallurgy to demonstrate that we can get recoveries in the 79 to 95% in both minerals, and that we're mimicking the Costerfield operation, which has exactly the same mineralogy, exactly the same geological setting, and they are selling a concentrate of gold antimony with recoveries over 90% for both metals. So it's not rocket science. The mineralization, the gold in this instance, is tied up with gold, arsenic, and antimony. So taking out a gold concentrate is not going to work. You then get into this recovery of metal price problem, if you like. But if you can take out all the minerals with a sulfide float economically and get that recovery, you both pay for your mining and you've got your gold as a profit.
Okay, fair enough. Next question would be on the Cumberland area. And so can you explain to me what a top verify AI target is? I mean, I'm familiar with verify, but perhaps explain where that comes from. What kind of data is backing that up?
Yeah, the good question. I see the verify process as an application of a systematic geological process done at speed. We have magnetics through the whole area. We have structural mapping over 60 years of very competent field mapping. We have good geology from both a local deposit scale and from a regional scale. Essentially, at least probably 15% of the area covered chemically, and of course, all the known historical mines and prospects. So Verify has a process where it can absorb this information, use it intelligently, checked very cautiously over the last 6 months by myself to see that layer by layer that they bring in is accurate. And then they come up with these targets. And the targets are not just magic. They come up with a scoring process that tells you what data that is pushing it forward as a interesting target. So you get to say, what's driving this? And I might say that so far there's been no geochemistry involved. It's all about structure and structural information with a good hand up from the geophysical data that's driving these targets. And so, like yourself, probably quite skeptical at first. And what is this target and what's driving it? Well, it's been driven by the data that we've handed over, verified, sorry to use the same word, but, proven to my mind that they're using the data in a geologically sensible way. And I might add, we threw out some stuff that just didn't work. For example, they said, oh man, we're seeing all these northeast, southwest structures. And they were the major valleys. And it was a contrast between 40, 50 meter beach forest and agricultural land. And you go, hey, hang on, guys, you got to have a bit of local knowledge here to understand that that's not going to be an association that'll work. Nicely picked, but, get off the grass if you like. But they throw up other interesting things. For example, they said, but you realize you've got an association with barium. And I'm going like, barium? I know barium turns up in volcanic massive sulfides and things like that, but never in an orogenic deposit. Then it turned out that in the Southern Cross mineralization, the deposits are associated with a barium-rich sediment. And so suddenly we're learning from another deposit, because they use the models for the other deposit to train in each of the orogenic areas, that there's something there that we should be looking for. So I've given you basically a bit of an overview of what I see Verified doing, but I can tell you that in each target, they come up and say, this is a high-ranking target. They specify exactly what data is driving that, and we get to test it and say, yeah, that's worthwhile. So somehow, we've got a problem here. We've got 30, 50 projects that we could drill, but we've got to get to the key ones, and we've got to get them early. And Verified is providing us with a tool that might take a team of 20 a year to create in a matter of weeks. And we can iterate it. We can say, don't like that. That doesn't make sense. And they'll go, why? This is what we think. Let's try this again. So it's an iterative process. It's not magic, but it's been extremely helpful for us to pull out things that we think, yeah, we ought to be there, but now they've verified, if you like, they've given us some good evidence to say we should be there.
Okay, and finally, and this would be addressed to Robert, and that's, what's your current cash position?
It's sitting a little over 3 million Canadian at the moment.
3 million Canadian. Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Mickey. Nick.
All right. Hi, Simon. Hi, Robert. Thank you for the information. I always like to get into the valuation. So let me just pull this up real quick. It looks like the market is valuing the company around 32 million US. I'm looking at the US ticker just to put it all into US dollars for comparison's sake. So you got $32 million market cap. You got about I thought you had a little more cash than you just mentioned. So you got 3 million or so Canadian in the bank. You've got some inferred resources, yeah. So how should investors think of this market cap?
I think an important way, at least how I look at this company, because I'm still buying shares as an investor, obviously as a CEO as well, but there's not many opportunities out there in the market where you can potentially hit the next hole of something similar to what Oceanic Gold hit before, and it's on the screen of that 20 meters of 60 grams a ton. And then you say, let's put resources aside because we're an exploration company and we're here to actually prove out how much gold is in this ground. What is a company valued at when you start getting those type of intercepts? And if anyone has room in their sort of risk profile of how they balance their portfolio, and if you have an exploration appetite, if you want those cliche term of a 10-bagger, I think this is it, because we're permitted for all our drilling. We're very solely focused on the drilling, and we have the potential for these amazing high-grade intercepts, which aren't valued at all into our little $30 million company at this stage. So I think that's the value proposition, and that's where we focus on Reefton in this pitch, is because in the next 4 months of drilling or 5 months of drilling that we've got the cash for, we expect some really interesting and exciting results to be coming out, which will revalue our company.
Okay, so beyond that, what are you looking for financing? So you're going to obviously need to do some more financings. Do you have any details on that and what the details could include?
Sure, yeah, we've got a shelf prospectus filed at the moment, so our first two financings were done. 8 million was done last July, and that was done at a 10% discount to where we were trading. At that time, it was $1.08. And again, no warrant, and it was a shelf takedown, free trading from day one. The next financing we did was in February, and that was really focus on drilling financing. So that one we did in July helped us get through an M&A deal we did to take over the whole Reefton Goldfield. Now our financing is really focused on drilling. Again, there was, I think, maybe even a 5% discount to market, no warrant, fully oversubscribed. We went out for 5, we closed 5.75, and we'll look to do that again before the close of the year. We've already got sort of in the wings, we've got a few $1 million of checks coming into the story. The nice thing is, because we've made a group of institutions money in the past from our past deals, we're fairly well supported when we come into financing. So we will tap the market again before the year is out. We want to let the exploration and the drill bit do the talking before we need to do that. And we'll look to raise. Our last raise was at 60 cents. We're currently trading at 70. We'd like to raise north of that. And so we'll look to do that later in the year.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right, I know, Brent Cook, you're having trouble with raising your hand. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. My little hand icon doesn't seem to show up. Good day, Simon. It's been a while.
Hi, Brent. Yep. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks. You too. So looking at the map that's actually on the up right now for Cumberland, the historic drill hole, 20 meters of 62 grams, came from east to west. And your hole went west to east, I'm looking at, and hit 3 meters of 6 grams, going through what looks like the same zone. I guess my question is, what sort of variability do you see in these veins? How variable are they, and nugget effect and that sort of thing?
It's got all of that and the above. No doubt in our mind that Oceana drilled down the vein. It was a most impressive looking vein. The core is still available for us. It had a visible gold trail through the middle of that quartz vein. So it is nuggety. It's very high grade. If you strike that that small narrow, like 3 centimeter wide gold vein within a broader halo of quartz, I'd put the true width in the region of 5 to 9 meters, which is a decent run. It wasn't that 20 meters had quite a lot of other gold in it. There was a 42 grams and a 20 gram, then a 2 and a 3 and a 5 and some 0.0. So you are seeing nuggety gold, but you're seeing fairly continuous grade over that zone. I was disappointed in those 2 results because it did look good, but I think that's typical of these high grade zones. Federations has exactly the same variability. The second hole could be 2. I've never seen such a broad, well-defined zone of quartz veining. So you've got in my opinion, you've got a decent chunky vein that's going to probably average in around 26, over 20 grams, around 1 ounce. And that's pretty much historically what they recovered from the string of the small mines. And you can see on that pink vein, that what we call Gallant 1, we're hitting the underground workings, but they didn't ever get to this big zone alongside it. And so to me, it's about following that quartz vein, demonstrating with enough holes that we've got continuity of mineralization. And historically, the grades should prove up in that range of 25 to 30 grams.
Right. And is it the Cumberland vein you've got 110,000 ounces on?
Old Creek.
Old Creek.
Oh,
Okay.
110,000 ounces. Yeah.
We've got 100,000 at Alexander, and we've got 110 at Old Creek. So there's around 400,000 ounces in inferred resources on the table, which we inherited or merged with Siren to take out those prospects. But we're focusing on Ord and Cumberland, both because they're unworked, right at surface, and easily accessible with road, and they're right there on the edge of where we need to go.
Is there a coefficient of variation on either of those resources?
I don't know quite what you mean by a coefficient of variation. I can say that, yes, it's variable gold. With Old Creek, it's much more consistent and evenly mineralized. It's not this high nuggety gold. We do all of the assaying of the Cumberlands and Alexander rivers with screen fire assay or photon assay. But with Old Creek, the gold mineralization is much more consistent and more easily defined. What we have done is worked closely with a resource specialist to define our drill spacing to determine a very precise way of our pattern of drilling to see that we're bringing these things into inferred and then indicated with a degree of precision which is giving us high confidence.
Okay, and that drill spacing is what?
It's 100 meters for inferred, 50 meters for inferred and 20 meters for indicated.
All right. Well, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Yep.
Go ahead.
Simon, Robert, good day. Thank you for the interesting presentation. I also had a question about drilling. I think you've said that you've outlined the goal of hitting 300,000 at each deposit. Can you walk us through briefly a realistic timeline and budget to get there? And also, I was also curious. These are sort of two questions wrapped into one. I was also curious about the involvement of Verify AIs in target generation. Perhaps you could elaborate on how that's shaping drill prioritization versus traditional methods. Are there, like, in your mind, are there any targets that you wouldn't have found otherwise?
To answer the first question, I think we've got fairly strong indications with the last 3 holes in Old Creek that we have already increased the resource by 50%. And so I don't think it's unrealistic to be doubling or trebling that result over the next 18 months. So I expect that we'll be starting probably a permitting process that's heading in the direction of a mining study contemporaneously with bringing that resource through. And our costs are around $500 New Zealand per metre drilling wise. So it's that's orientated core, and that includes assaying costs as well. As far as Verify is concerned, it's quite exciting what it throws at you. When in their first phase of targeting, and I by necessity need to be skeptical about that process. It both on Old Creek, it drove out a secondary target immediately to the northeast, around 2 kilometers north of that shape showing in front of you. And right at that time, my team were out there soil sampling because we'd already identified this area as a place we ought to be. Geochemistry was taking us there. And they came back that night, had no idea what I'd learned through Verify, saying that they'd never seen so much quartz on surface. A really rugged bush area that hadn't really been sampled before. And there we have a Verify pointing us to an area, and there we have a team in the field picking up quartz. that's pretty amazing kind of scoping, if you like. And further to the west, immediately west of that by about 2 kilometres, it pulled up this shadowy anomaly and said, "Hey, look over here." And that turned out to be an area that Siren first went into 5 years or so ago when they first had these properties. And they started the work in that area knowing that it was interesting, and got diverted off to Alexander River where they did the bulk of their drilling. And that project, what we call Soldiers Road, was left languishing. Verify said, "Hey, don't forget about that. You should get out and do more work there." So it tells us, it suggests where we should be working. From that point on, it's entirely driven by, good exploration practice and drilling. We're not looking for verify, or at this stage doesn't drive out sort of targets within a target, if you know what I mean. It doesn't guide the exploration while you're on a particular project, but it is certainly assisting us in saying, start there, not over there. And I think that's one of the more difficult questions we have in terms of defining, where the next large size deposit. And I still believe that whilst we have modest resource aspirations early on, there's some big systems there that 3 million ounces on the table today, could be significantly north of that if we look at the lookalikes of a Bendigo Ballarat system. Can be a lot larger.
And what kind of drill density are you targeting right now?
We're drilling 80-meter spacing along strike and 40-meter down dip.
Okay.
Modified, I might say, by the comment I made to Brent just before, that the resource specialists are saying 100, 50, and 20. So we're modifying our 80 by 40 just to accommodate that on the particular deposits. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lau. Adrian, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I thought Byron was ahead of me. Sorry. I had a couple of questions, if I may. The first one, just looking at your budget, first of all, what is your burn rate and on G&A and everything, not on drilling? And then secondly, what is your budget on everything, drilling and everything, for, let's say, the next 12 months? That would be my first question.
Yep. Well, we can start there. So G&A in terms of Vancouver is very light. I mean, we're myself and a fractional CFO up here. With the lawyers, the listing fees, etc., we spend around 800,000 Canadian per annum. We allocate money to marketing to do things exactly like this, and so that's a sort of depending on how the business is going, and right now that's sitting at around $500,000 a year. So G&A wise, 1.3 in total.
Okay.
That's all Canadian dollars.
Okay.
Then layering on the New Zealand exploration costs, currently with the 2 rigs running, our local burn rate down there is about $500,000 a month. And that covers the 2 rigs with the assays, with the exploration teams, with the field workers and etc. So current burn rate on a monthly basis is anywhere from 600,000 to 700,000 Canadian.
Okay, great. And then, but you're going to have to do a raise sometime this year.
That is correct.
Have you given any thought to trying to get early expiration of the warrants that are in the money?
Yeah, I mean, there's very few warrants. I'll just pop up to the cap table here. We've only got sort of 0.6 million broker warrants. So because we've raised without any warrants, we don't really rely on warrants for subsequent financings. But I can say that again, the institutions are sitting on the sidelines and are happy with what they're seeing. And we've got some repeat shareholders that will come in again.
No, gotcha. The warrants wouldn't really take you very far. Sorry, and 3 quick questions. I'll just do each in order and you can answer them. I may have missed them, and if I did, I really apologize. When you estimated antimony 25% of a revenue on that project, is that at antimony's current price? That's my first one. My second one is, I'm not sure I saw Martha on any of your maps. Where does that sit in relation to WKP and Glamorgan and so on? And then thirdly, Siren, do they have a lockup, or what's their intention for being long-term shareholders or selling? Or
Sure, no, that's great. I'll start with Siren just because we're on the page. So they currently own 22% of the company. That's locked up in a waterfall with tranches releasing over the next 18 months. Currently, that's all being held by Siren, and the chairman of Siren is on our board as a director, Brian Roden. He's their nominee, essentially, and we have a good relationship. So their plan right now is to hold on to the shares, even with a portion of it escrow released. But they're essentially locked up for another 18 months ahead. They came about as shareholders because when we first listed this company, we held essentially the northern side of the deposit. Let me get the pen going here. So we had 4 historic mines. We had the north side of Reefton locked up on our side. And we did a deal with Siren Gold whereby we actually bought their Reefton project out from that company. And rather than buying the whole Siren company, because they had another couple of projects that we were less attracted to, we said, we just want your Reefton project and we'll give you X amount of our shares and $2 million in cash for that project. So that's how they came about to be shareholders. They believe in that Reefton district. They think it is an amazing district scale play. So they're very long and supportive shareholders in what we're doing there.
Okay, and I'm sorry to interrupt or to add on to that. This is an existing company. They do have other projects they're working. So potentially they might need cash from this for their other projects.
Correct. And we've written a ROFR into that shareholder agreement where we get first option to buy those shares. We can find blocks and things like that. So we do have a little bit of control of where those shares land. They won't just get blown out into sort of the market.
Good. Okay. And the other, sorry, Martha.
So next on the list is antimony as we move down the deck, and antimony. So I want to just add, antimony right now we're using a stibnite price or an antimony price of 35,000. Again, we've talked about it trading at close to 60,000 in today's terms. So yeah, definitely not using current spot. I think it's hard to use current spot just because it is an opaque market. We just don't know where it's going to move.
Sure. Okay.
Finally, the Martha is actually it's gone through a few different hands in its time, but it started as Martha Open Pit. It's now called Oceana Gold's Wahi operation. It's still operating today. It's doing 50 or 60,000 ounces. It's gone underground there. So that Martha Open Pit where Simon started his epithermal career is right there, and then WKP is, as the crow flies, about 10 kilometers north.
Okay, super. Thank you. That's me then.
Thanks, Adrian. Byron, if I skipped you before, I apologize, but please go ahead now.
Well, that's okay. Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah. I visited the booth at PDAC. I still have my handout. I was very intrigued at the geology and the chemistry of what you've got. There's an echo on my...
Yeah, we're hearing the echo as well. I'm not sure. I think you're on 2 lines. It shows.
I got off of one of them.
Yeah.
I'll speak slower and carefully. Let's see. I'm just trying to eliminate something. You've answered a lot of questions, so thank you. Could you give me a better explanation of what are the mineral rights here? Who owns the minerals? The government? And are there a native corporation? Is there a First Nation issue? Something like that. And I'll stop there because I'm annoying myself with this echo as well as everybody else. I'm sorry about that.
Simon, do you want me to do that one, or did you want to?
Go if you like. Yep, I'll fill in the detail.
Byron, you go.
So both the Reefton and the Glamorgan project, our tenements both sit on government land, and it's called Department of Conservation land, or DOC land in New Zealand. Essentially, DOC control or hold around 33% of New Zealand. And before we jump to the conclusions of conservation land means national park, it's very different things. So it's essentially just custodian land by the government. And so when we get our drill permits and we get our access agreements and we go for our mine permits, we deal with firstly NZPAM, which is New Zealand Petroleum and Minerals, and that controls everything under the ground, and that's just your normal mining body of the country. And then we deal with DOC to get surface access because they control the surface of the land. So it's very much a well-defined process. You then and where the fast track plays into it is sorry, before I finish on DOC, so essentially to get drill permits, to get access to do our surface work, our soil sampling and things, we put an application in with Department of Conservation. They look at our application, they look at what we're going to do and any remediation we need to do. So for instance, we drill some holes down in Reefton. If we finish with that drill pad, we'll disassemble it, we'll plant the trees where we cut down the trees, and we'll move on. And so they want to just make sure that we're being good custodians in the area. Coming into the native title sort of piece that we talk about, the New Zealand sort of Maori groups around us are different between the North and South Island, but there's always a consenting process with them, or an obligation to keep them in the know of what we're doing. They don't necessarily per se approve a project or have a say in whether it goes or doesn't go ahead, but we keep them involved and we keep them abreast of our operations. And they are very interested in what we're doing because they're all very entrepreneurial and good business operators, and they see huge growth for their businesses when we're operating in these regional communities. So how the fast track played into that is that it puts NZPAM and the Department of Conservation and the iwi groups, or the indigenous groups, all into one panel. And when you come to getting a mine permit now, you consent with all those groups in one hit, and that's now a 6-month process. So that's sort of the government side of it. Simon, if I've missed anything, I'll let you add some extra detail there.
The simple answer is that the minerals reside with the Crown, right? So the minerals are all owned by the Crown without exception, and the Crown control those minerals through the mining permits, and they have a tellurium royalty based on production. So the minerals lie with the Crown, and our rights are defined by our permits.
Okay, good. Lawrence, please go ahead. Lauren.
Yes. Hi. Sorry. So look, I understand the huge upside potential of, getting a long, high-grade gold hit. But aside from that, can you elaborate on any upcoming milestones and how achieving those milestones will impact on the valuation?
Sure, yeah, and that's an important point, Lawrence, because me personally, I love to see high-grade results, but I'm not here to sell my shares in 2 months' time. Once we hit this high, juicy vein, we're here to create a company. And so maybe that is coming into what is our plan on the longer-term basis. And there's a reason we're planning our drilling around a central point of Reefton, is that we want to create this hub-and-spoke type approach when we're creating this mine plan. And it's exactly what we did in Colombia at Aris Mining with Segovia. It's 4 underground mines feeding 1 mill, nice high grade, 10 gram a ton head grade. it's a cash generator, and that's what we want for Reefton. Essentially, outside of drill results as upcoming catalysts, you're going to see a slow building of resources. I say slow because Old Creek is 110,000 ounces. The goal and what Simon and I will be measured on this year is how many ounces can we create in Old Creek by the end of the year. And we're going to do a 43-101 refresh by the end of the year, because really we want to take advantage of this fast track permitting process. So if we can build to an economic size of deposit at Old Creek, and we can really understand what we're looking at there, and the government are already pushing us, and they're already very excited to see this antimony potential unfold, because it really does put New Zealand on the world stage. Antimony is so scarce that if you've got it, every world leader wants to talk to you. And so it's really important that we're seeing and working with the government on building that forward. And so the other catalyst is going to come building that resource, growing it, and seeing what strategic partners we can find that will come into the story on the back of that antimony resource. So it's not just a matter of how much antimony and what's the price and value it based on that. It's who you're going to be partnering with, because you've got the strategic metal. And we see it with Larvotto out of Australia. It's an ASX producer. They saw a $6 million injection from Wogan Group, which is a metals trader out of London, a Chinese-backed metals trader. So you've got the groups like the US Antimony, like the Japanese that need antimony for all their car batteries. You've got these groups out there that are trying to secure supply early. And right now it's that minerals war that we're seeing unfold. And that could be a potential catalyst that we're working towards. Moving into the North Island, at the end of this week, we're going to be identifying and submitting, oh, sorry, it went the wrong way. We're going to be submitting our application for drilling at Glamorgan. And so you're going to see a number of catalysts coming out here. And it's a bit of a neurology story where we're going to be putting in our applications for drilling to be able to be drilling at the same time our neighbor is getting permitted. And so I think from our company valuation perspective, I actually don't think a $30 million valuation covers any value for Glamorgan at the moment. I think Reefton on its own easily holds its own for that valuation. I think Glamorgan is complete blue sky upside. And as soon as we see our neighboring project, which is already a huge deposit in its own stance, get permitted and go into construction, I think people are going to wake up and say, oh, Glamorgan in this northern epithermal range actually has huge potential. And that's where we're going to be drilling at the back end of this year. And I think that one is going to make Simon's life a lot easier, because you're not chasing these narrow, high-grade variable veins. You're now in epithermal land where things are much more consistent and predictable and much easier to drill for the geology.
Okay, that's great. If you could maybe just take a step further in terms of timing, your adjacent project on the North Island, and when production might be achieved there, and at Reefton, when will you get to the stages of having production within sight, or a plan leading to having production in sight?
Sure. So starting on the Northern Island, I'm not going to talk about production just because we haven't even put a drill hole into it yet. So I think I'd be lying to you. Yeah, I know for sure. The company adjacent, they're going into construction, permits pending. They'll be fully permitted by August, and they'll be constructing by September. And we've purposely wanting to put our drill applications in at the same time now, so that they'll be approved by August, September. So as they're going into construction, we're going to start our drills turning. And so that's an instant thing. Popping up to this picture, they're not doing anything earth-shattering here. They're building a tunnel from the outside the Department of Conservation land through to the ore body. And then they're going to truck everything back down to the Waihi infrastructure. So they don't need to build a plant. They don't need a tailings facility. That's a straight plug and play of a new ore body feeding the same plant. So that construction will be happening later this year. At the same time, we'll be starting our drilling program up there. I think, and we're going to talk, with all things going well in exploration sense, we're going to be building out a nice resource at Old Creek. I think that's going to come along nicely, especially if the antimony prices hold where they are and actually stabilize here. I think that becomes very valuable. And so I think Old Creek would be the perfect starter underground mine for a small sort of 300 ton per day plant. And this isn't far off how Rua Gold was built. Rua Gold was Burkina Faso, started with a single underground development, 300 tons per day, produced 80,000 odd ounces a year. And then we're going to do the exact same with Old Creek. One starter underground mine. We know we can prove up a deposit there very quickly. If we can get there, we'll aim to go into a study phase. I'm not going to call it a PEA, PFS. We'll see where we are geologically. But we'll enter a study phase at the end of this year to actually understand what do the economics look like for Old Creek. And then at that stage, we'll also know how the Cumberland drilling is panning out, and we may incorporate a second underground shaft there. But when we develop this Reefton district into a mine, we'll start with a 300 ton per day plant, a 300,000 ton per annum plant, and then we'll upsize that to around a 550,000 ton per day ton per annum plant. And that on the spreadsheet is looking at giving us, assuming around a 6 to 8 gram head grade, will give us anywhere between 120 to 150,000 ounces per annum.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
All right.
But Lawrence, in short answer, sorry, we're going to start that study at the end of the year.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lawrence. Ed, go ahead, please.
Hi, Simon. Hi, Robert. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfect, Ed.
Hey, how are you? So the question is, I've got a few questions here, but how deep do you have to go to build, say, the 300,000 ounce inventory at each deposit at the Reefton project, do you think?
Right at the moment we're showing that the deposit goes at depth to around 250 meters, and we're just down at 300 meters drilling at the moment. If we can, and we can see it's open to the north on 2 of the lodes, and to the south, so we don't actually have to go much deeper. We just have to prove length, and so literally we can treble the resource if both north and northeast and southerly extensions, which we're seeing at the moment. We're drilling to the south off pad 18 and hitting mineralization at 250. Our current resource sits at just on 120 meters, so we've probably already doubled that resource by doubling its depth. So we don't have to go much deeper than 350 to improve that resource significantly.
Right. And so what minimum inventory do you think you need, total inventory do you think you need to get to a production decision?
I would say 400,000 to 500,000 ounces.
In total, right? Okay.
It's an interesting one, Ed, because we've got this mix of Canadian influence and North American influence and I'll say I've worked now across Australia and Canada in the corporate sense. And in Australia, they want to rush to production. They want to say, let's prove up minimum number of ounces to justify building a plant and start cash flowing. And we know there's more gold here. We'll find it once we get our own cash flow to find it. Right. Then you've got the Canadian sense that let's drill this thing for 5 years and really sell the dream of having 10 million ounce deposit and wait for someone to buy us. And I think we're trying to approach it somewhere in the middle where we don't want to be hamstrung by the market to say, oh, we don't think you have many ounces in your valuation and you're raising money at rubbish valuations. We want to really prove up 400,000 to 500,000 ounces, as Simon said, at Old Creek to justify that's one project in the Reefton district. Mm-hmm. And that's going to justify us kicking off a small plant. And then as we go forward and as that valuation improves, either through cash flow or through some good exploration results, we'll then continue to expand that Reefton property. And as Simon said, there's 35, 40 targets that we can go after. It's prioritizing and working out what are the lowest cost ones and why these are near surface ones to actually build out ounces. to then move to that next phase. But I think the short answer to your question is, as Simon said, it's 400,000 to 500,000 ounces gets us justifying a small plant construction.
Yeah, I'm with the Australians. I like to get to the cash flow. So what's the difference in topography on your targets vis-a-vis the Waihi or the Globe? Is there a potential for open pitting, or is it going to be strictly underground mining? Excuse me.
The shape of the deposits,
Sorry.
the shape of the deposits lend themselves to underground mining. They're relatively narrow and steep. And from a permitting point of view, on Department of Conservation land, the process will be a lot easier if we stay out of the open pit word.
Right. Is the elevation higher on your targets than the Globe and the Waihi mines?
No, we're actually just in that picture there, just to the right of Ord Creek, you can see a little green sliver going up a valley there.
Mm-hmm.
That's 300 meters lower than the mineralization. So if we portaled into there, we'd be portaling directly in to the base of the deposit. It's less than a kilometer in, and we can have a plant and be working that deposit from its base. You know, it's kind of a no-brainer to come in and develop from the base and work our way up. So that's a simple scenario, if you like. And just addressing the 400 to 500,000 ounces, we already have that 400,000 ounces. It's just that they're scattered. We want to consolidate one and get it to kick off the others. But we're right now sitting on 400,000 or 500,000 ounces of gold.
Right. And so this has also been around for a while, right? The targets. When was the Cumberland discovery actually made?
We've only been, so it was drilled by OceanaGold in 2013 and 14, just before they locked up shop and stopped mining in 2015 at Globe Progress. And those initial drill holes were just left. We only acquired, and the first time workers actually started on the ground again since 2013 is in April this year. So we have had that broader Siren portfolio under our belts only since November, and access and drilling on Cumberland starting in April. So we're less than 2 months in.
What have been the impediments to following up on that hole, like by Siren Gold, for example?
For Siren, it was money. I can't speak for them, but they it's probably the permits went into a what they call a newly available acreage. So when permits become available since Globe Progress, they go into a government system where you bid, and that bidding process dragged out over almost 3 years, and that was with a government that was pretty neutral about mining or even negative. But this current government, things are really moving. We get access in a very quick time span, and we've been able to get on with the job real quick. But I would say the reason that Siren weren't able to move is that the ownership or ability to work that permit took 2 to 3 years, and then by the time they got to that point, they were out of money.
Okay, thanks. And two more quick questions, I think. Is the gold refractory at Reefton so far? In your
Ord Creek style of mineralization will be a sulfide float style, but Cumberland, Alexander, Big River, like Blackwater, is free gold, gravity separation style gold. So there is a mix.
Okay, great. As expected, right? So if all goes according to plan, and I know you said you didn't want to really touch on production, but like in a dream scenario, if all went according to plan, how long would it be, take to get to production? And what kind of CapEx would it require for 300 ton per day?
Sorry, Simon.
So, Robert, I'll just talk to the permitting quickly, and then you can do the numbers. The new fast track process is very quick, and the interesting thing about it is that they have a sort of have you got the paperwork right phase, which takes about 3 months of lining up all the agencies together and getting all your paperwork ticked off before it goes into fast track. But once it hits the fast track, then it's deemed to be granted. The fast track committee only sets conditions on that permit. So once you've been through that 3-month process, you know that you're guaranteed that permit will be granted, which is a pretty amazing fast track process. And that whole process is about 6 months. And we can be doing quite a lot through that process to see that decision to mine and development is then thrown at Robert and Paul and his team. And I'll let Robert talk to that.
Yeah, and we've got a technical committee that we've established already to start, and that's where Simon will start talking to this sort of sliver of green up here and where we can sort of get a development portal into the bottom of Old Creek. We're already thinking about how this mine plan comes together. And so in the ideal timing, we start the 6-month permitting process by early to mid next year, and we'll be fully permitted by, let's call it late 2026. And then given it's such a small plug and play build, we talk about a 9 to 12 month construction timeline. This is a nice little mobile plant. And these things cost circa around 120 million US to put into place. Again, nothing complex, no new untested technology here. We're just doing a straight gravity gold antimony float that Costerfield are already doing, but their mine is 30 years old. So there's definitely some advancements. But yeah, the cost base we've looked at this stage is around 120 million initially. And then the upsize, which we'd do upon building a second portal, which at this stage is planned for Cumberland, would cost a further around 45 to 50 million US to upsize that. And that would upsize the plant from a 300 ton per annum to around a 550 ton per annum.
Yeah, I like those numbers. Thank you.
Yeah, I think an exploration company that is trying to process 0.5 gram a ton gold and needs to have huge throughputs and $1 billion capex, I think is a lofty target for us little guys. I think small is beautiful. Small high grade is really the beautiful thing that we're chasing here.
Yeah, I do like it. I like that. I like that. I like the numbers on that. Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks, Ed. Brian, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Robert and Simon. Great discussion here. I think I'm the last up, so I'll try to make it pretty brief. A couple of quick questions. On the Cumberland drilling, that historic hole of about 8 meters true width at 62 grams per ton, it looks like you were targeting that directly with your first hole, as Brent indicated. How close did you come to that, and why was that historic hole never followed up on?
Yes, we directly targeted that intercept. Of course, we would love to have repeated the 1910 gram, but that's high grade gold for you. And we probably hit it. I think the better intercept was in 2, where we had 17 meters of quartz. So what we really demonstrated was, one, with the first hole exactly where it was, and that the drilling down, I'm not a fan of drilling down lodes. It doesn't tell you geologically what's going on. And the big broader intercept 40 meters below clearly demonstrated continuity in size, and then the variability of gold is going to be a arithmetic or a statistical process, which I would see in the range of a 25 to 30 gram overall. To answer why wasn't it followed up, OceanaGold had a relatively passive exploration program through the period of the mining where they were looking specifically to add ounces close to the mine. And once they made a decision 2014 to close down the mine. They closed down the exploration, and that drilling was literally delivered at the very end of their at the point at which the decision to stop mining took place. So there's been no physical exploration on this ground since 2015.
And I'll add that, I mean, I'm a big LinkedIn user, and we put out this target that we're chasing up the old Oceana Gold hole on LinkedIn. We said we're going to start drilling. I think we put it out early April when the drill started commencing. We had this comment from the ex-geologist who now is up in Papua New Guinea working up for K92. He's come in and commented saying, this is the best target in New Zealand. And this is an independent geo that worked here, and it broke his heart that they didn't follow it up, and he had this amazing intercept that he got told no more drilling dollars are going to be spent down here. So he's come in and said, amazing that someone's finally following this up. It's the best target in New Zealand. And this is the boom bust story of mining, where you have these amazing historic results that some corporate person decided not to spend any more money on.
Yeah, it's amazing how much money has been made over the years from big company bureaucracy and stupid decisions. So congratulations on that. Moving to the North Island for my last question, the Oceana Gold's WKP project with 1.37 million ounces at 17.8 grams per ton, that IRR of 24% looks surprisingly skinny. So that implies either very high CapEx, which you've implied isn't the case, or high OpEx. Can you kind of explain that and what the implications might be for anything you might find at Glamorgan in terms of epithermal mineralization?
Sure, yeah, I'll put a bit more flavor here. I mean, I definitely wouldn't say it's not high CapEx. The one thing I have said is they're using all their current infrastructure, but it is quite high CapEx in the sense that they plan to build a 6-kilometer tunnel from outside the Dock estate all the way through the ore body. So you've got 6 kilometers of underground development before they actually reach the ore body. That's not only a cost process, but it's a time process, because that's quite a big decline to develop. Again, Oceana Gold are great custodians and they're great examples in New Zealand. They may go a little bit over the top in the sense that they've also then planned to build a full tunnel from the farmland all the way back down to their infrastructure of 8 kilometers underneath the town and farms here. So they've gone, and we're in the area of New Zealand on the North Island that, yeah, it has a rich mining history, but you're also up in this area close to the Coromandel, which does have a lot more noisy voices in terms of people saying no mining up in the Coromandel in New Zealand. So this is especially important area where we always say we're only ever going to be underground mining. We're not doing any more open pits up in this northern area, because the community definitely doesn't support that style. But where you've got underground, very low footprint type projects, it does cost a bit more CapEx to develop them. But again, it's the grade that sort of saves the day there and makes it economic. I do agree that the IRR is quite low, and it's being driven by the time and cost of the 6-kilometer decline. And I think probably the over the top approach of fully developing another 8-kilometer tunnel all the way back to the plant, rather than doing surface transportation.
And your targets at Morgan are fairly well defined at this point in time?
That's correct. So maybe I'll let you speak to the surface work you've done.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've been privileged by the board to let me play the whole surface exploration process through over the last 12 months. We've completed surface geochemistry, Anaconda style, very detailed surface mapping right through this region, and use clay mineralogy, rock chip geochemistry, and then finished off with ground resistivity to define real drill targets where we've demonstrated both the high-level epithermal system over a 4-kilometer zone, striking in the same direction as WKP, with resistivity targets to drill. So we've gone right through with a very systematic exploration process where every kind of core geological, geochemical, and geophysical system has been used and defined these targets. So this is not a nice painting on the picture there. This has got some very robust and rigorous science behind it to determine these targets that we've got. And of course, these first targets will be fun and challenging, but the footprint is there for something that is identical to WKP and or Waihi. Just to also just sort of talk to your comment about the high capex process. Oceana are coming this 7 kilometers, but we could come in from the top here less than 2 kilometers into what could potentially be an ore body. So the logistics of development of this can be approached quite differently than Oceana Gold have chosen because of their plant. They've said, okay, let's bring it all back to the same plant. We could challenge this in quite a different way, that the capex of any development would be, it doesn't have to follow the Oceana model.
Great, thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Brian. We got Doug and then Ed real quick because we're going a little long, but please, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, I lived in New Zealand for basically about 7 or 8 years after the turn of the century, and actually went up into the Coromandel quite a few times because I lived close to there. But this was a great presentation, and the project sounds really good. You answer all these questions very well, I thought. It seems like you're slated for success. Everything sounds right here. There's one problem. It's that New Zealand is notoriously green. I certainly noticed that when I was living there. It's like a haven for granolas and environmentalists. And I'm just wondering when the tide turned. Was it after Jacinda was left office? And I don't know who the current government actually is. I haven't followed it for the last couple of years since Jacinda was kicked out. And I know it's very hard for you to speculate on this, but what are the chances, as you look at it, that they'll turn hard left again and make things much harder for you in the future?
Yeah, there's a lot to bite into there, and I think starting with the current government, so the Prime Minister's Chris Luxon. He's definitely not the lifetime politician. He was the CEO of Air New Zealand up until 2020, so he has a strong business background he's come into his essential stance on getting into power was to actually fix New Zealand. And New Zealand was in a recession at the end of Jacinta's term, and they had a lot of counterproductive measures in place. And Chris Luxon's come in and said, we need to reinvigorate and create more industry in New Zealand. And look, over the road in Australia, they're booming because they actually let you do mining there. So they're using mining as a major vehicle for economic growth and job creation and high-paying job creation, but also regional development. Everyone was moving to the cities, and I think the statistics, Simon probably know better than I, but I think it's something like 70 or 80% of the population are on the North Island versus the South Island, where the Auckland and Wellington are. So you've got a huge push for regional development, regional jobs, high-paying jobs, and that's what mining is delivering. To your point on where they stand politically, the latest polls, not that we should ever trust polls, do see them improving in their favor, and they are delivering on their economic improvement goals, and the population are seeing that. So they are improving in popularity, but I mean, it would be reckless to think, what do we do if or not planning ahead to say, what happens if the other party get involved? And that's where it's really important, and it comes back to some of the earlier comments, is that we'll always sit here and say we're only going to be underground miners. We think underground mining is the way forward for New Zealand. to keep the community happy, regardless of the government in power. We want light environmental footprints. We want to give back and put money into the Department of Conservation to help with their efforts locally. We want to be good custodians in New Zealand. And so there's always going to be a world where we're always going to be fairly conservative of how we approach this. We're never going to be under open pit miners, and that's what we want to reiterate to the people of New Zealand, to keep our good social license and also just be good custodians to fit the project to the geography. I will mention as well that the West Coast, and you lived up in the Coromandel, so Coromandel is the polar one end. The West Coast of Reefton is the other end. And when you look at the sort of topographic map of Reefton, one, it's called Reef Town. It's a whole town of gold reefs with historic mining in it. It's called Reefton because of its mining past. And so any bar or hotel you walk into there's mining paraphernalia everywhere. And on the edge of these mountains is a coal seam. And so there's active coal mines in this area. So this is where a lot of the coal comes out of Reefton and it gets shipped off at Westport off to Japan. There's mineral sands that are getting mined out here in the West Coast. So we're in a very mining-friendly district in the South Island. And so Reefton and the West Coast of New Zealand is very industrial focused and very heavy in terms of how much mining is present there already. And the final thing I'll mention is that even under Jacinta's administration, under the old further left-leaning political powers, our neighbors here, Federation Mining, actually got their permit. So they haven't gone through the fast track process. They haven't got their permit under the new group. They actually got their permit under the more centers/left political power before. So we're very optimistic. I think Coromandel agreed. I mean, looking through the Oracle, we don't know which way it will go when it comes down to permitting that mine, if the other side are in power. But Reefton, we're fairly confident that regardless of political regime, that mines will get permitted here, that they want regional growth and they want regional development, and they want to bring Reefton back again.
Okay, that's great. Definite cause for optimism. One brief follow-up question. What is the one thing that worries you that could go wrong here, that kind of keeps you up at night when you are thinking about it?
I'm going to dare to say, Simon and I have the same worry that geologically, Reefton is a hard place to find gold. Like these are narrow veins, and you, as we've seen from these Cumberland holes, you can be 20 centimeters left or right of that main gold-bearing vein and have a completely different outcome. And so the biggest risk, and I think it's prominent in any explorer, is that you run out of money before you actually have the capacity to prove out the opportunity here. And we've got a huge opportunity. And as we've talked about, we've got $3 million in the bank. We know we can raise money, but I'm a major shareholder. I don't want to be diluting myself at a $40 or $30 million valuation. And so the balance for me and what keeps me up at night is the most effective and efficient drilling campaign to get the most out of our shareholder value, essentially.
Okay, great.
All right, great. Ed, did you have your last question or no?
I didn't realize what time that we were going on such a long time. Sorry, guys. Just the last question I guess I had was before you have to go to the market again to raise more cash, what exactly are you what kind of news can the market expect?
So we've got assay results from Old Creek sitting at the lab right now. And so as quick as that lab turns around, we'll have more results out of that. Cumberland drilling has not stopped since we've been waiting for the last assays that came out today. So we've been pulling core and nice quartz out of Cumberland that is still getting pulled out today. So I think, and that's where we talk about immediate catalysts are all going to be drill results out of Reefton. And then we will be submitting our drill application into the North Island Glamorgan project. And I think the one thing I haven't mentioned is that even with this great resource of 1.5 million ounces at 17.9 grams a ton, since that resource has been defined and announced, OceanaGold have continually put out more and more drill results that only improve that that size and grade. So I think if people really understand Glamorgan and understand the analog between Glamorgan and Wharekirauponga, I think that value is going to start coming into it, especially as it gets permitted.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Robert, Simon, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It was a fantastic presentation. If you don't mind, if you want to hop off the call now, panelists will just talk for a couple minutes. And Robert, I'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
your time.
Cheers.
All right, guys, what do you think?
Since I started, can you hear me?
Yes.
Since I started, I'll give my comments first. Without it, pardon me, without a doubt, this, in my opinion, is the best company we've looked at yet. It meets my top 4 criteria. Share structure, got a tight share structure. It's got experienced and successful people. It's got a couple of really interesting exploration projects with some near-term potential. It's got some cash. It's going to go to the market, raise money, but they keep increasing the amount of money their private placements are listed at. So my only real concern would be the same as Doug, and that's I have concerns about New Zealand because of its history of left-wing political and green agendas, and it could be just, in a worst-case scenario, it'd be another election and someone like the previous president, and I can't remember her name, but she was a disaster for New Zealand.
Horrible.
Horrible.
Yeah, so Mickey, is that
especially during the pandemic, just out of bounds.
The worst, yeah. I wonder, Mickey, is that enough though to keep you from investing in?
No. It's a roll of the dice. Always, I've gotten burned in more than once in Scandinavia, which Sweden, Finland, which we all think are mining friendly. So no, that is not enough. Would not be enough. But once again, it's always a gamble.
Yep. Yes, sir. Okay, great. Who else like to just chime in?
Can I chime in? I think I fixed my sound issue here. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah, I concur with Mickey completely. Ahern was the person's name who was the previous prime minister, and she was your basic left-wing authoritarian. I saw these guys at PDAC, and then I sort of put them in my back pocket as like, okay, I'm going to do something with these guys eventually. And then they popped up on this scope, and I was very excited about this. I think he's underplaying the antimony side, although I understand why. Leave that to other people. I've been following antimony deeply. Antimony is a story that is not going away, but they don't need to burn their credibility on antimony. Let me do that, or other people who understand antimony. But I think the combination of a really sweet, small but high grade, gold play with the antimony upper there is upside is it makes this almost a no-brainer in terms of writing it up to a particular kind of reader to the newsletters. Yes, so I'm really grateful that we have these guys, and I think it was terrific to hear their presentation. They're very polished, and clearly they know what they're doing. That's my view.
Yeah, it seems like the antimony thing is a big deal. I mean, just a quick glance at their press releases. There's, at least in the headlines, no mention of it whatsoever. So I'm sure the street is unaware in general. So that shows upside. Brent, you were going to jump in?
Yeah, I know some of the people. I've worked with Simon at Glass Earth. Very solid guy, knows the geology. I've been through Reefton a few times in that area, and it is probably the most mining-friendly region within New Zealand. My concern is these veins are highly variable, and it's going to take a lot of tight drilling to prove up a resource, indicated and measured especially. He mentioned 150 meters or something if we're inferred. That's way out of line. That's going to be 20 meters. So I'm looking at the cash they've got, which isn't going to get them through this year. And the amount of drilling has got to be done. And I personally, I'm going to wait for the next financing and then decide whether to come in or not.
Or would drill results change your mind about it somewhat?
Not really. I think we know what we're going to see. We're going to see some high grade hits and some, 1 and 2 gram hits in the same vein within 50 meters of each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's my guess anyway.
Okay, great.
That's my pick.
Great.
I could say
Brian?
something.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. Brian, I thought
I was going to agree with Mickey. I think this is the best we've talked to so far. My concern is really among, like Nick's, that they have a fairly high market cap for what they have right now. But I think that they kind of undersold the projects or what they do have. I mean, they control a district with historic production at very high grades. The hub and spoke idea really just came up at the end. And they could have just led with that. And the admission that they have about 400,000 ounces already, and what they can see is something you can't put in a news release, but the kind of thing that needs to be put in these kinds of discussions. I agree with Brent, though, that it does seem very nuggety. You look at Oceana Gold's project and a 22% IRR on 1.4 million ounces at 17 grams per ton. There's something going on there that should be wildly profitable. So that they did kind of explain that, but the devil's going to be in the details on what they do on their project there. But the Cumberland drilling and everything else, I think, is a near-term story anyway. And these are proven mine builders. It's a great team. And if they think that they can do a hub and spoke project like this and they're in for the long term, I think there's a lot of credibility built up there.
Excellent. Okay, Ed?
Yeah, I echo most of these guys' comments. My concern would be that I shied away from New Zealand as well in the past because of the how green the communities are there. And the only concern I would have is, like Brent said, the variability in these kinds of deposits, make the waiting for the drilling news kind of a gamble sometimes. And they are kind of short on a lifeline, so they're going to need to raise money, like before they even start a new drill program almost. So, I think I would probably. The only other concern I would have is, I guess it's not a concern, but I like the fact that they've done their private placements without warrants. I think that shows a bit of a strong hand. Um, I'm not sure if I like the liquidity that much, maybe 100,000 shares a day on average it trades, but for retail, it's probably pretty good. But I think I would agree with Brent. I'd probably wait for the next financing.
It's funny to hear you guys say that, because thinking that this is the best one we've seen so far, and yet, you're a little, or I don't know, there's something in your own psychology. I don't know.
Well, I wouldn't say it's. I agree. It's the best we've seen. I would agree that it's the best.
The last one you placed an order during the presentation.
I know. I didn't want to upstage everybody this time. I would have done the same thing this time because I like the story. I like the story. I'm contradicting myself now, but I like the story. I think the downside is, well, I think that the difference between this and the last one is that with American Pacific, it was they have the cash to sustain a few failures, So so if they drilled and they missed, well, they still have cash to be able to continue drilling afterwards, right? With these guys, if they drill and they don't get the kind of results that you want, then it's a 30-cent stock. So,
all right, okay, good. Anyone else want to add anything before we wrap up?
Well, I usually don't like to buy stocks unless I can do a private placement with a favorable warrant. But I am impressed by the fact that these guys have been able to finance without warrants. And I think it's a good deal. And I listen, this is just me, but with gold at 3,300 and things the way they are, and the fact there's zero interest on the part of the retail public in these stocks, I think it's a good bargain, and I'd be willing to buy some out of the market, and I think I will, which is not something I normally do because I only deals with warrants.
And then there's the antimony story, which is important. Yeah.
That's a big plus.
I'll chime in on the antimony story, and that's no matter what people say, the Chinese still control the antimony market. And when antimony prices go high, they sell, and and then they cut back on their exports. So antimony is a very fickle metal, and perhaps that's the people at Rua Gold recognize that, and perhaps I'm just speculating, maybe that's the reason that they have not emphasized antimony.
That makes sense. And it was good to see that they were pricing it at not quite half the current market of it. They were being conservative about that, which was good.
Yes.
Yeah, antimony's main advantage for a company at this stage is just as leverage to get permitting, really. Yeah. That's what governments are interested in. Retail investors are completely disinterested in it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much again for doing this, guys. I love having your expertise. I learned a ton. It means a lot to me. So, and I know that we've gotten good feedback from people who have watched the prior ones. So thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.